Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Laws of Attraction, written by Deathworlder. Shortly after developing very reliable, faster-than-light drives, humanity joined the Galactic Union. Most of the other species in the GU had accepted the Terrans with hesitant, positive regard, acknowledging the feats humans had accomplished in a short period of time compared to the rest of the universe. Other species were eager to engage, but typically for their own benefit. Some species seeking allies for their questionable plots and schemes, others seeing the planetary systems around Sol 3 or Earth as an undiscovered country open for exploitation, despite the colonies and claims the humans had already filed with the Galactic Union. One such species was the Plorixium, which to most humans looked like someone had attached a cuttlefish to the body of a centipede, only with about 2 legs on each lower part of the 2 elongated tentacles being just below the head and 8 shorter arms surrounding its mouth. The Plorixium were consumers, and removed every available resource from most planets they came across if it could be done profitably. And those that couldn't be stripped clean would become factory planets to produce whatever the Plorixium needed, regardless of the damage to the environment of the planet. Approximately 5 years after humanity joined the GU, the Plorixium attacked multiple Terran colonies and space stations simultaneously. They had even used FTL technology to launch unguided missiles towards Earth in an attempt to knock out some of the capabilities there. The attacks on the colonies and space stations had been effective, and the Plorixium had succeeded in taking over most of Earth's assets in the universe beyond the prime planet itself and the colonies and stations in the home solar system. Earth's ambassadors to the GU filed a complaint against the Plorixium, arguing no declaration of hostilities had been filed, and the Plorixium argued that they had filed one and showed electronic proof of the declaration being filed. Since electronic declarations were one of the easiest things in the universe to fake, the GU decided to form a special committee to investigate whether or not the declaration had been filed appropriately. This meant that while the Plorixian were free to continue attacking the Terrans, no other species in the GU would become involved in the conflict. The GU had its uses, but it was also the largest known bureaucracy, and its actions were burdened by the many customs and social expectations of its various members, thus making it next to useless in crisis situations. The Plorixium had paused in their assault on Terran space to begin absorbing what they had conquered into their empire. They hoped to use the newly found wealth to improve their armadas, as well as make donations to other species to help them make the right choice when deciding whether or not to rule the declaration had been appropriately filed. In the meantime, humanity had pulled back, concentrating resources, focusing on manufacturing for the inevitable final conflict with the Plorixian. The Plorixian method of warfare was to use several smaller corvette-type craft in conjunction with a few large capital ships that were also crewed processing factories and refineries, so the Plorixian could begin processing the resources as soon as they had possession of the planet. The Terrans, on the other hand, the Plorixian observed, were spending all their resources on destroyer-class ships, more maneuverability than the capital class, but it would take the dedication of several destroyers to knock out a capital ship, and in the meantime the Terran destroyers would have to contend with the corvettes. After 2 years of both the Plorixian and the humans preparing for the final conflict, the GU had finally ruled in favor of the Plorixium, and stated that the declaration of hostilities had been properly filed but had been mislabeled, and that was why humanity had not received notification. The Plorixian growled in triumph. Not only had the GU sided with them, but the Plorixian were both confident in their technology and their ability to outproduce the humans, given that the Plorixian had seized so much in the way of raw materials and armaments. They were ready for the final fight, and to absorb all humanity just as another resource to be used. Humanity, on the other hand, had been silent for the most part. Official objections had been filed by Terrans over the 2 years the GU had been investigating the filing of the declaration of hostilities and the other dubious actions of the Plorixian in the financial interactions with other species. But all these had been ignored for the most part by the GU. This only emboldened the Plorixian, who proudly showed off their marshalling of their fleet in preparation for the final assault on Earth and the Terran system. It was during one of these displays of Peluxium military might in the GU General Assembly that the human ambassador once again rose and signaled his request to be acknowledged by the Assembly as the Peluxian representative returned to their section. The Chancellor of the Assembly gave its version of a sigh and signaled that the human ambassador had the floor. My fellow ambassadors and representatives, approximately 7 years ago we joined you here to take part in furthering of all species and meet the challenges of the universe together. Unfortunately, 2 years ago we were assaulted by another member without notice or provocation, the human ambassador stated. No objection, Councillor General. It was ruled that the humans were properly notified before we sought to reclaim our rightful resource, the Peluxium representative challenged. Ah yes, this matter has been fully adjudicated. The human ambassador will refrain from making statements to the contrary, and the statement will be struck from the official record. The Chancellor General, a great walrus-looking creature with longer neck and ears reminiscent of an elephant, announced. Regardless of the objection, it does not change the facts of the matter. That being said, it is not the reason I came before the Assembly today. At this time, I ask before all the member species of the Galactic Union for the unconditional surrender of the Peluxium at this time. The finer details of this surrender will be worked out in full at a later date and time, but at this moment only the Peluxian surrender, full and complete, will result in cessation of hostilities, the human ambassador grimly stated. There was a moment of complete silence in the General Assembly, while the various species in attendance all double and triple checked what the human ambassador had just said and had been correctly translated. Then a wave of uproarious laughter began in the Peluxian section, and it shortly spread to the allies amongst the assembly. After the laughter died down, the human ambassador, still holding a grim countenance, addressed the assembly again. I am waiting for an answer from the representative of Peluxium. Oh, you stupid Terran, we will hold you before the end of the next cycle of our moods. The human ambassador sighed and returned his attention to the Councillor General of the Assembly. Councillor General, you have heard the reply of the Peluxian ambassador. Understand what comes next is a result of the Peluxian actions. They had the opportunity for peace, but chose war. So be it. We, the Terrans, will now end this conflict. The General Assembly was mostly silent as the human ambassador returned to the Terran section. Peluxium representative was pointing and laughing at the ambassador, who upon returning to his seat was whispering something by an aide, continuing to hold the grim look in his face. The human ambassador locked eyes with the Peluxium representative and nodded. It was at this time that one of the Peluxium aides scrambled up to the representative. Most esteemed High Representative, the Supreme Board of Rule of Peluxium Prime wishes to know if anything drastic has taken place. What? No! Just the stupid Terran ambassador demanding our unconditional surrender. I told him no, of course. Stupid humans think that they can bluff their way out of their defeat. Most High Representative, we have been losing contact with our colonies and factory worlds at an alarming rate. Do you think the Terrans have had anything to do with this? Don't be ridiculous! The Terrans have nowhere near the quantity or quality of armaments to wage an offensive against us. The Peluxium representative glanced nervously over to where the human ambassador was sitting. The representative noticed that the ambassador was just staring at him, a stony, grim look on his face. Yes, my esteemed representative, the Supreme Board of Rule is requesting that you obtain any information that you can in regards to the Terrans' military activities. The Peluxium rubbed its arms with its tentacles and signaled the Chancellor General that it wished to have the floor again. The Chancellor General rubbed its tusks. It hated sessions like this, and it didn't seem like it was going to be getting any better soon. The representative of the Peluxium has the floor, the Chancellor said. The human ambassador raised his eyebrows and sat back in his chair. Representatives and ambassadors of the Assembly, I have received notice that there are events occurring in Peluxian space that are not our doing. They are suspected to be human actions, and I demand to know what they are doing in our space. The human ambassador rose from his seat and signaled to request to speak. The Peluxian representative gave permission, as they currently held the floor. I will now respond to the representative of Peluxium's accusations. First, suspicion that humans are involved in what is currently going on in Peluxium space is not proof. Please refrain from making accusations without said proof. Second, I invoke the right of counsel before responding as to what, if any, actions humans are taking in Pyrrhixum space. I will say with utmost certainty at this time, however, that there is no Terran military personnel in Pyrrhixum space. That is all.
What? What does that mean? I demand answers,
the Pyrrhixum representative shouted. The human ambassador merely looked at the Chancellor General, nodded his head, turned, and left the assembly with his staff. The Pyrrhixum representative was furious, but there was little he could do. He had invoked the right of counsel, which gave any representative or ambassador 48 hours to consult with their governments before answering any charges or accusations made by another member. The Pyrrhixum representative had used it many times against the humans when the Pyrrhixum started conquering Terran colonies and space stations. And now it was its turn to experience the frustration of not knowing what was going on. In the 48 hours since the human ambassador had left the assembly, the Pyrrhixum Empire had been almost completely destroyed. The FTL missiles that the Pyrrhixum had sent towards Earth 2 years ago had arrived, but then they were pulled off course by Earth's moon. Once the missiles determined that they were no longer on course, they attempted to self-destruct. But being fairly new armaments, the sections that remained contained major FTL and other Pyrrhixum weapons secrets. Humans took to the technologies, reverse-engineered it, and then made it better, and now were sending missiles back to the Pyrrhixmians, only it wasn't just missiles. Instead of wasting huge amounts of resources on building and maintaining giant capital ships, the humans had just found hard rock and iron asteroids of sufficient size to survive FTL travel, and also cause global catastrophe when they struck the planet's surface. Since these asteroids were not going to be manned, the cost of installing FTL drive and engines were minimized, and the fuel requirements were also drastically reduced, since an asteroid coming out of FTL directly in orbit path did not require additional fuel to maneuver if the intent was to impact the surface. Since the asteroid was minimal resources involved, 3 to 4 asteroids could be sent to each target point, so that even if the planet defense systems were able to deal with the first one, the debris from these asteroids would confuse or overload those defense systems, and the next asteroid would make it to the surface of the planet. Missiles were sent against targets in space, with the first missile detonating early, blinding the defense system, with the second and third missiles getting through. All the boasting about the Pyrrhixman forces in the General Assembly had given the humans a close enough approximation of location to send rockets and asteroids their way as well. The Prime Admiral of the Pyrrhixmian Space Force stood there, stunned, on the bridge of its capital ship. 3 large asteroids had just dropped out of FTL and were in orbital path of Pyrrhixum Prime. The asteroids had dropped out close enough to the planets that the defense systems had only a chance to engage the first one, and all 3 had been captured by Pyrrhixum Prime's gravity well. The Admiral was powerless to do anything as the asteroid survived entry through the atmosphere and struck the planet's surface. It was watching its home planet, and the home planet of its entire species, being destroyed in less than 10 minutes, as the shock waves and debris from the impacts on the planet's surface completely covered it. The Admiral was about to give the order to move the fleet away from the planet and orbiting defense stations, when a bright flash of light overwhelmed the defense systems of the fleet for a second, which was just long enough for several missiles and an asteroid to appear out of FTL in a direct collision course with the fleet. Panicking, the fleet's XO turned to the Admiral and cried, "Point-blank FTL weapons off the bow! Our defense systems are being overwhelmed, Admiral. Impact in less than 1 minute. What do we do?" The Admiral looked at his XO. "We die." 48 hours later, the human ambassador returned to the General Assembly. He took his seat in the area and did not visibly react to the silence that filled the assembly. The Chancellor General waited another 10 minutes for everyone who was going to be attending that day, before declaring the General Assembly in session. The human ambassador waited through 15 minutes of silence, with all the other species staring at him and his staff. At that point, he stood and indicated on his comm tablet that he wished to have the floor. The Chancellor General cleared his throat and announced the human ambassador had the assembly floor. The human ambassador made his way slowly to the floor and took his place behind the podium. "My fellow ambassadors and representatives, approximately 7 years ago we joined you here to take part in furthering of all species and meet the challenges of the universe together. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, we were assaulted by another member without notice or provocation, the human ambassador stated. This time, there were no objections, only the quiet murmuring of other species in the assembly. I understand that we are still new to you all, and the way we take care of our business is only now being further displayed for your consideration. For 2 years, we have given the Plurixians every opportunity to find peace with us. They declined to take advantage of that opportunity. 48 hours ago, we Terrans gave the Plurixians the opportunity to surrender and survive. The ambassador gestured to the empty Plurixim area of the assembly. They again refused to take advantage of that opportunity. Perhaps they thought us incapable or unwilling to do what needed to be done. They have learned a devastating lesson that I hope and pray the rest of you will take to heed. We are used to danger. We are used to death. Just being alive on our planet attracts those things. And I say this with all sincerity. If you threaten us, we will have no problem bringing the danger and death we attract to your door. At this point, the Plurixian Empire has ceased to exist, and we will be taking what resources and materials that are left as compensation for their unprovoked attack on our people and our species. If you have any objections, I now give you the opportunity to present them. There was a strained silence in the assembly as all the members simply stared at the little bipedal mammal that spoke with such words of death and destruction. The ambassador waited another couple minutes in silence before stating for the record, "No objections heard," and he returned to his seat, a satisfied smile on his face. End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, it's difficult to pronounce, Lord Arishakal, Dragzoon, WRE, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.